mission did the A-bomb drop in the morning and arrived back about early afternoon, 16 hours up there and back. But one of the most famous, they did take a picture of her landing at Tinian, coming right in over the end of the runway, and here it's got the Circle R on the tail. So fast forward so that the Enola Gay comes back.
I think she's
Yeah, I got it fixed.
Exactly.
So the Enola Gay comes back here and eventually is parked at a field up near Washington, D.C., and they even took the wings and tail off of it and stored it in some building there. Didn't have a hangar space. And so, 30 years after World War II, we formed the Six Bomb Group Association and stuff. Anyway, the Air Force, I won't get into that, but anyway, they decided they were going to reassemble the Enola Gay and put her on display. So they sent out to each of the bomb group associations a letter, Dear Bomb Group Association, like Six Bomb Group Association, we're going to reassemble the Enola Gay, but we don't have all the money it takes to do this, so we'd appreciate any B-29 groups sending us some financial assistance, and we got a list. They had a list of things they needed to do, and one of the items on the list was paint exterior and install new trim, which they meant like the decals and stuff that are on the outside. And I've served on the board of the Six Bomb Group Association since it was formed. I'm the only one left standing that was on the original board. And so I go to a board meeting and they said, we got this letter from the Smithsonian and they want us to contribute some money to help restore this plane. And they said, do we really want to get involved in this? And they passed around copies to us. I think there was 9 of us on the board then, and we looked at it. So someone said, gee whiz, they said, restore paint and interior trim and all this stuff for, I don't know, it's about $6,000–7,000 or something. And this was 25 years ago. So it looked pretty significant to the little amount of money we had in our group treasury. It's about as much as we had in our group treasury, as a matter of fact. And we said, God, what we ought to do is tell them that we'll pay for restoring the paint and trim if they'll do it in the exact war colors when she dropped the bomb. Well, she dropped the bomb, marked as a Six Bomb Group plane. And so the more we kicked it around, the better the idea sounded. So John Jennings, he's dead now, but he lived in Phoenix, and John was the president of the Six Bomb Group at that time. I'm the president now, what's left of it. Anyway, John writes a letter back to the Smithsonian and says, oh yeah, we'll take item number so-and-so here, the paint and trim, and we'll pay for that, provided it is painted in the exact mission color. So we send it back, and in about a week or 10 days, he gets a phone call from some guy at the Smithsonian and says, hey, he says, we're going to do this. He said, why didn't you just send your check? And he said, well, we want to make sure you paint it in the actual mission colors. And the guy said, oh yeah, we're going to paint it in the mission colors. He said, well, you know, when it flew the mission, it was painted in a Circle R. And the guy said, well, yeah, we're going to do that. And so John said, well, if you'll guarantee you'll paint it in the mission colors, we'll send you the check. Well, then he didn't hear anything for about 2 months, a long time. I remember he said, well, he obviously found out what was going on. And then, by golly, the Smithsonian checked in with John and says, yeah, we'll do it. Well, then here we were as the directors. We pledged to send this $7,000-odd off. And we said, geez, if we send them $7,000, that cleans out the group's treasury. And so we passed a hat, and among the 8 or 9 of us on the board, we all put some money in, and we raised the money privately and sent it back, and so they painted the plane in those colors. Well, fast forward, it took about 3 years to restore the plane, and they put it in this new Udvar-Hazy Museum, and they're having an opening day, and the Smithsonian called all the Six Bomb Group Association, and there were only about 7 or 8 associations, there weren't that many groups. And they called up and invited us to come back the day previous to the formal opening of the Udvar Hazy, they were gonna have a private showing for the B-29 guys who had contributed to restoring this place. And we went back there, and we were just, the night before we met in the hotel there nearby, there's a hotel right on the airport, right near it. And we met in the hotel and we were talking to each other and said, you know, we're gonna walk in the morning and that thing's gonna have a circle arrowhead on the tail, no matter what we said, and what do we say? Well, we can't say anything. We went over the next morning and here it had a circle R on it.
Did, yeah.
And we were building around and others were building around. There were probably 150 guys. There was only about 4 or 5 of us from the 6th. And anyway, there's a stairway you can walk up and look down. The plane is elevated. The plane is sitting about 6 feet high on a big stab. In other words, you're looking up at the wheels and stuff. It's up, but you walk up these big stairs and look down into the cockpit and stuff. And I went up there and I ran into some guy had I think his cap said press or something. He was some kind of a reporter. And I went part way up. There was a place where the stairs made a little landing and then went on up. And I was standing on the landing kind of looking in at what I could see in the plane. And he came over and he says, were you one of them guys that flew on this plane? And I says, no. I says, I wasn't. I was in the 6th bomb group. And he says, oh, well, what's the difference? And I said, well, I think I said I was in the Circle R group. And he said, well, this is Circle R. And I said, well, this plane flew the mission as a Circle R instead of a Circle Arrowhead. And I says, and that's the colors it actually had on the mission. He said, oh, that's interesting. And we talked for a few minutes. So I went on up the steps and then across and was working my way back down the other side looking at it and shooting some pictures. And as I came down the steps, I looked down at the steps when I was about 20 steps away or 20 feet or more away, and I see this guy down there with about 10 or 15 guys around him, and he's pointing up at something, and I looked around and I couldn't see anything, and I looked and they're pointing at me. He had a bunch of the 509th Bomb Group guys, the A-Bomb Group guys, and he told them, well, they were all really disheartened when they came in and saw their plane displayed with 6th Bomb Group colors. And they'd said something to this guy heard him, and he said, well, that guy up on the